dog and D.I.
John Maynard Keynes was born on June 5, 1883, in Cambridge, England. His father, John Neville Keynes, was an economist. His mother, Florence Ada Keynes, was a local social reformer who eventually became the first female mayor of Cambridge. He was an expert in math, but was also interested in literary manuscripts. He owned manuscripts of Newton's earliest works in physics. He was also an expert on the development of grass-feeding stuffs. He eventually founded an arts theatre at Cambridge because he found the lack of one disturbing. He studied at Eton and Cambridge, and worked in the India office for 2 years in the revenue department. Eventually he returned to Cambridge to teach, and he also became editor of the Economic Journal, a post he held for most of his lifetime. In 1925, he married a Russian ballet dancer named Lydia Lopakova.
Keynes's first book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, was published in 1919. In this book, Keynes discussed the economic consequences of the reparations put in place against Germany, arguing that they were far too severe and would result only in the collapse of the German economy due to decreased demand. In addition to providing valuable economic insight, the book showcased Keynes' skills as a notable writer and helped launch him into the international spotlight, beginning a long career as an influential economist.
1776 seemed like a long time before 1900, when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations and introduced the world to capitalism. By the time that Keynes was really an adult, the world was poised for a new economic thought, and when he emerged in between World War I and World War II, there were high levels of unemployment and low levels of production, a problem that basically no country in the world was able to solve until Keynes introduced an idea that made it seem so simple.
In the 1920s, Keynes believed in monetarism, meaning that the way to stabilize the economy is to stabilize the price level. He would do this by lowering interest rates when prices rise and raising interest rates when prices fall. When Britain's unemployment rate spiked between wars, he changed beliefs and wrote them in the General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money.
So often, in the past 10 years, I have had to prophesy evil. But now, a great weight is lifted from us, a great tension relieved. There's no danger of the exchange falling too far. There's no danger of a serious rise in the cost of living. The worst I should expect would be a return to the prices of some 2 years ago. But meanwhile, British trade will have received an enormous stimulus, much more than most of us have yet realized. It's a wonderful thing for our businessmen and our manufacturers and our unemployed to taste hope again. But they must not allow anyone to put them back in the gold cage, where they have been pining their hearts out all these years.
His second book, The General Theory of Unemployment, Interest, and Money, was published in 1936 and was his most celebrated contribution to modern economics. Keynes illustrated that economies suffer from an overall lack of demand, leading to increased unemployment, and that the economy is not capable of operating quickly to self-correct decreased demand. He argued that government policies, particularly deficit spending, are the best way to quickly reduce unemployment, as opposed to passively allowing the private sector to stimulate the economy.
In the classical model, long-run aggregate supply was thought to be unaffected by the changes in aggregate demand, only leading to increases in the price level. Keynes agreed with this, but he once famously said that in the long run, we are all dead. So, he cared more about the short run and the very short run, and he told us that in the short run, prices are sticky, and the aggregate supply curve is actually horizontal. All of a sudden, people started thinking about what was happening now instead of what would happen in the undefined future. At that time, if one major player in the economic system believed that a downturn was on its way, then they would start buying less from their supplier, and their supplier would start buying less from their supplier, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that wouldn't be fixed on its own. This is where Keynes' idea of deficit spending came into play. Instead of dealing with the supply shortages of the major players in the system, Keynes believed that if the government could deficit spend in significant amounts, it could stimulate aggregate demand and push us out of the economic slump that we were in.
Keynes believed that once full employment is reached, interaction with the economy should be kept to a minimum. In fact, he once said that apart from the necessity of central controls to bring about an adjustment between the propensity to consume and the inducement to invest, there is no more reason to socialize economic life than there was before. This is actually contrary to Marx. It leans more towards Smith. Marx would have preferred constant tinkering, while Smith advocated a hands-off approach.
Keynes stepped on the shoulders of economic giants as he developed a new form of liberal thought. Prior to the ascendance of Keynes, classical liberalism was the most popular theory of the day, and classical liberalism advocates civil liberties with a limited government, basically laissez-faire economics. And this thought was championed by the work of economists that came before Keynes, such as Adam Smith, John Locke, Jean-Baptiste Say, Thomas Malthus, and David Ricardo. Modern liberalism is the construct that Keynes developed, and it's also called social liberalism. He added one new fold to the past theory by maintaining that governments had the responsibility to address social issues such as poverty, health, and education. We can see that Keynesian thought has had a large impact on modern-day politics as governments focus on critical welfare and education programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and No Child Left Behind. Moreover, because Keynes thought that the causes of unemployment were technical and thus could be solved precisely instead of overturning the entire economic system, his theories were more conservative than most people believe. He wasn't completely advocating a dismantling of economics.
Keynesian economics was the prevailing economic thought for about 40 years, after which his ideas were largely brushed aside, making way for Milton Friedman's free market ideas. Keynesian economics previously believed that the economy faced a long-run trade-off between unemployment and inflation. Friedman went against this belief, instead arguing that a permanently increasing inflation rate is necessary for low unemployment levels. However, Keynes's ideas recently made a comeback in 2008 in response to the financial crisis. President Obama and his economic advisors tapped into Keynesian economics with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. The plan called for $194 billion in new spending in order to improve infrastructure and extend unemployment benefits, drawing the ideas of deficit spending paired with undertones of the modern liberalism that Keynes championed. Furthermore, Keynesian economics was adopted and spread by John Hicks, Charles Schultz, and Arthur Ocon, who built upon the principles that Keynes laid down.
So let's look at John Maynard Keynes in the big picture. Keynes was more practical than Adam Smith in proposing actual fiscal policy tools that the governments could utilize in order to respond to economic downturns. Smith would disagree with the government interfering at all because he believed that the economy would always fix itself using the lever of the invisible hand. At the same time, Keynes kicked up a lot of socialist dust, as some of his contemporaries compared him to the socialist Karl Marx, when Keynes argued that governments had a responsibility to implement welfare policies. However, Marx wouldn't like that Keynes was doing because Keynes was really only righting the ship when the waves of the economy got choppy. Not only would Marx prefer constant tinkering, he would also prefer complete government control of the economy. Keynes moved past both of these influential economic thinkers as he developed a new brand of economic thought that advocated for an active government that used policy to both further the well-being of its citizens and its economic markets.